Hello, everyone. It's Slava Grumluk, Director in PAI. We will be starting the program in about 8 minutes at 1:30 prompt UK time. So if you're joining, please bear with us. We will be starting shortly. Hello again, it's Slava Grumluk, Director in PAI. We will be starting shortly in about 4 minutes time now. Everyone who is joining the session, please bear with us, and we will be starting at 1:30 UK time promptly. Thank you.
having got to do with it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and welcome to PAI. The webinar is called Leading Yourself and Others Through Challenging Times, and particularly in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. My name is Slava Grumluk, and I'm the director of PAI. Public Administration International is a London-based international consultancy and training organization, specializing in strengthening governance worldwide. Our webinar today is a short overview of the major challenges in leading individuals and teams. I'm delighted that our leadership and coaching experts, Sheena Matthews and Janet Waters, are here to talk you through approaches to addressing these challenges and to exploring with you opportunities for the future. Sheena and Janet are the workshop directors for our annual international workshops on leading and managing the results. When they have finished their presentation, they will be happy to respond to your questions. Now, let me briefly explain the platform we use today for the webinar. It's called Showtime. On your left-hand side, you will see icons. In the list of, there's an icon for questions. With a question mark, you are welcome to post any questions you want to our trainers to answer. We will take them at the end of the session. During the session, we will also run polls. So when they are running, you will see on your screen some questions, and please answer them. There's also a section icon called chats. That's the opportunity for you to chat to other fellow participants of this workshop. If you at any point have any technical difficulties in using the platform, please put your questions in chats, and my colleagues will be able to come back to you, hopefully addressing the issues you have. Now, thank you again for joining. I'll introduce you first to one of the trainers, Janet Waters. I'll hand over the controls to her, and she will go through the presentation.
Thank you, Slava. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for...
Janet, you would need to accept the controls so the participants can see the camera.
Yep, I've accepted it.
Excellent.
So that should be fine. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you, Janet, but not me yet. Not sure about other participants.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll just carry on with this in terms of workshops aims at the moment. So welcome, everybody. It's a great list of participants and such a lovely spread from around the world. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to spend an hour just thinking about this issue of leadership in these extraordinary times. And this is the purpose really of today. So really we're looking to review the challenges of leading in these current unprecedented times. And of course, we're looking at some of those behaviours that we're going to need to really focus on in order to drive us through and be positive throughout these times. And what we're aiming to do is, looking at some of the research, is just draw on some of the things that we've learned and that we're working with clients on, to focus on approaches that really make a difference to success. Because I think we're all looking for that, to see, well, what can we do? What is it that's going to make that difference? We, again, focus very much in PAI on leadership behaviours during our programmes. And again, a sort of refresh and an introduction today into some of those really important leadership behaviours that we believe are really helpful in these transformative times. And I hope during this hour, as you hear the presentations and see the questions from others, that it gives you an hour to reflect on your own personal challenges, and think about maybe one or two things that you might be able to do differently or to enhance as a result of some of the thoughts during this 1 hour presentation. So I'm Janet Waters. As I say, I'm one of the co-directors of our leadership programs, and I'll be delighted to be working with you for the next hour. I'm going to hand over to my colleague now, Sheena Matthews, and I'll change the slide. So my picture's up, I think, now. So Sheena, I think you should be there now.
Can you all hear me?
Has Sheena picked this up?
No.
Sheena, are you there?
I am there.
Yeah, we can hear your voice, Sheena.
Yes.
Can you hear this? Can you see the agenda slide, Sheena?
I can see the agenda slide, but can you hear me? So have I got control?
We can hear your voice, not the camera, but maybe you can just pick up with just the voice for the time being.
How strange, because Janet's now on camera. How bizarre. I'm sorry about this background chat, everybody, but we're all still getting used to this new way of communicating because of the challenges that COVID-19 is giving us. As Janet has just said, as she introduced me, I'm Sheena Matthews, and what we're going to do for the next 60 minutes is to take a look at some of the changes that have hit us. Last November, nobody knew much about COVID. Some parts of the world that had dealt with SARS-1 had got some experience of what to do in a pandemic, and we learned rapidly from them. But we're all in this together right now. So we're going to look at the context of this major change, look at what sorts of things you might need to do to get through this and to start shaping a new way of working and a new way of living, and ways that will actually increase your effectiveness. It's all going to be a different sort of burden, and what we don't want is for people to go under whilst they're trying to lead and manage in their organisations. Next slide, please. So, what are the challenges that we're facing? The big one is that the pandemic is here to stay. The whole system is affected, all sectors. It's having an impact on agriculture, on business, on health, of course, on transportation, employment, tourism, and the general economy. It's not just a health issue. It's not just an organisational issue. It's actually affecting the whole system of society and all sectors of government. This means that it's got implications for how we think and devise and communicate about the policies that we're involved in, particularly in the public and government sectors. And much more joined up thinking is needed, but I'll come on to that later. Another of the associated challenges is that it's actually magnified economic hardships, inequalities in society, and vulnerable groups, whether that's by dint of education or employment type, or in some places, like the UK, it depends upon your genetic and racial background. Another of the challenges is that not only are we trying to deal with the pressures at work, we've also got pressures on our own staff, of course, but we've got pressures on our own families. Many of you may have family members who are vulnerable. You may be vulnerable yourself. And that means actually relating to people in a way that recognizes crisis, but also demonstrates compassion and understanding. The new normal is becoming a bit of a pat phrase, but one of the things that it points out is that we are never going to go back to the old ways. Life and the way that we worked and ran things as we knew it then has actually gone, and we do need to move on to a new normal, which might provide us with, oddly, some new opportunities. Change at the moment is really rapid. We've got to adapt very, very quickly. Excuse me. That means personally, in our own personal approach to leadership and the way that we look after ourselves, the way we relate to our teams and organise and support our teams, our organisations, the sector we work in, and really at country level and world level, if we are going to implement change, not just to deal with this pandemic, but to ride through it and create a new way of tackling future crises. And the other influence, of course, that's been around for some time, but is getting to be more and more significant, is the use of technology on the way that we work and the solutions that we can come up with. So what's coming out of this? Well, what we're finding and what some of the clients that we're working with are finding is that at a community level, people are much more aware of what is going on, aware of their neighbours, aware of their communities, and willing to engage at a community level. They're not looking to the government to come up with all of the answers. The pandemic and the challenges are, of course, affecting health. And that's not just the physical health and the impact that it's having on those people who actually contract the COVID-19 virus, but it's having an impact on the pressure and the response time and the response capability of our health services. The other impact that it's having is on people's mental health. And we're finding that people are suffering particular difficulties, young and old. The pandemic is actually creating new and different ways of working and leading, and we would like to hear from you as to what impact that is having. In the UK, it means a lot more working from home for those who are able to. But those people who have to travel to their jobs, or those people who have actually got to be physically present in workplaces, it puts a different sort of pressure on them. We need to be collaborating more. We need to be more cooperative with our colleagues. We cannot solve this by working in small, isolated units. And we all have expectations about how this is eventually going to be solved. How will our employers deal with this? How will our societies deal with it? How will the governments deal with it? And you will know from looking at the press and staying in touch with social media that there are a range of different approaches across the globe, some of which are actually more successful than others. What we do know is that we need to start doing things differently. And at a human level, it means making sure that we trust people to get on with things. If we haven't got somebody sitting next to us in the office, then how do we trust that they're doing their jobs? How do we trust that they're getting on with things? And we have to actually start building those trust bridges. We have to be more creative. We have to expect people to come up with solutions that will actually help solve work-related and day-to-day problems so that we can adapt and innovate in order to survive and ride through this. And that means individuals working differently. It also means that employers have got to adapt. For some, that means creating different physical spaces For others, it means learning to trust their employees to work when they cannot actually physically see them. And that is something, again, that we would like to hear from you on. All of this means that whatever we used to communicate with people and however we learned day to day using the workplace as a learning laboratory is actually now magnified way beyond what it was 6 months ago. And in all of this, leaders have got to be much more resilient and to create an image of being calm and confident. And more than an image, what we need is to develop those personal strategies so that you survive through this, that you can develop resilience muscles and others can start to rely on you and trust that whatever you communicate and however you are leading will be something that they will benefit from. Next slide, please. This is a chance for us to ask you some questions. Thinking about the pandemic and all of the other pressures that are on you at the moment, what do you see as the bigger challenge for you right now? Is it motivating yourself or is it motivating your team? And the second question is, how ready do you feel to deal with this challenge? And just 3 options. Confident that you're ready and raring to go, perhaps not quite ready and think you could do it but would like some coaching, or just not ready yet because the support mechanisms and your own personal stamina is perhaps not up to it just right now. So let us give you a few minutes just to respond to those questions and to post things up in the chat room. We'll pick up the responses to those questions. There's a lot of hellos and lots of networking going on in the margins, which is lovely to see. And one of the great advantages of being able to go worldwide right now. I want to hand over to Janet now while we're compiling some of those questions, and we'll come back to them, the responses to the questions, sorry. Let me pass over to Janet, who is, as she flagged up earlier, is going to discuss with you some of the up-to-date research that's going on to the way that leaders are responding to this challenge.
Okay, thank you, Sheena. Thank you very much. And I'm looking at the poll results coming in, so I can see that a lot of you are being, are focused on motivating your teams as the biggest challenge. And I can also see that a number of you do feel confident, but also there's a larger number of you who say yes, nearly ready, but also welcome some coaching or some support as we go through these extraordinary times. And so we're just make sure that we look at those, but it's just giving us an idea of where we're coming from. Yes, I wanted to do there's lots of research going on, and there'll be many more areas of research programs, I'm sure, during this period. But just picking out some of the things that we've been noticing and working on, which we thought might be of interest to you all. So thinking about so a recent survey from Hey Recruitment was saying during these times, what are some of the things that leaders need to be thinking about, sort of sensitive to, aware of? And in that particular survey, and I think it comes true in those leaders that I'm coaching and working with, is that leaders are needed to improve their communication. It's a challenge at any time around how do leaders communicate. In the UK, we get it constantly on our TVs about our leaders not communicating clearly and positively. And I think at the moments where people are on high stress, high alert, we're wanting those simple messages. So this notion that how are we doing with our communication is an issue for us all. This particular survey said that in terms of the contact with their manager or their leader, it was less than once a week, and about a third said it was daily. And again, you'll see later on when we come to some of the findings that actually during this time, particularly, there's a hunger for more contact, for more interaction, particularly with those colleagues around you and your bosses, as it were. And 34%, which is more of a worrying statistic, I think, said that the contact with their manager or their leader had reduced during lockdown. And that is where obviously we're not working, a number of us aren't working on our normal ways of working in a normal office environment. Some of you may be continuing in a normal way, but for those of us who not, a worrying trend about that lack of contact. Another survey that we drew on as well said, building on what Sheena was saying, was that 24% in this survey said that they do discuss health and well-being with their managers, with their leaders, and workload. And again, everything that's coming out is the importance of maintaining positive well-being and health, and how important it is to actually have that noticed and have that two-way communication with your manager, with your colleagues. And interesting again, 75% would like their manager to check in more regularly to discuss their health and well-being, and performance and workload. And 10%, you've got the figures up there. But it's looking at that combination. It's looking at how are you today? What's going on for you in this extraordinary time? But also, what does that mean for the way you're performing your job? And what does that mean for workload as well? How is that workload changing when you're perhaps not in the normal, regular office environment? So that was some of the initial findings that we've drawn on and substantiated. Now, there are many approaches to leadership. One of the ones that we draw on extensively during our leadership program and during our coaching is transformational engaging leadership. Excuse me. And I think one of those things that it's absolutely relevant, and you'll see later on another tool that we're using that's drawn out from this, but it's absolutely relevant to some of the challenges leaders have and some of the things leaders need to be noticing in the way that they're working and behaving during these times. The personal qualities and values, the section in the beginning, where actually how we come across as leaders, what it is that we've got by way of personal qualities and values, and how we demonstrate those with those that we lead, absolutely vital. In other words, knowing ourselves. I read a quote in one of our articles recently about leadership development, and the CEO of the Chartered Institute of Personal Development said, actually, developing behavioural and values-driven leadership is going to be essential as we move forward and think about how leaders are developed. And part of that is understanding your values and what values you draw on in order to lead in these extraordinary times. Another part of this model is our important role that we have in leading and developing individuals, our employees. And won't go into all the details in there, but actually that top one, showing genuine concern, is probably the most important aspect that we need as leaders, but also during this pandemic. How do we relate to our employees? How do we ensure that we are concerned and that we understand, the issues that they may well bring to the workplace? So a critical set of behaviours here. Leading and developing the organisation, again, that very important aspect for leaders in thinking about how do they develop their teams, something that many of you on this call today are saying is of the higher importance for you. So how are you developing high-performing teams? How are you developing those teams when maybe they're all working remotely using technology? Certainly my clients are mainly working at home and trying to build and grow their teams through the use of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and other technology. But how do you do that? And how do you keep people inspired and focus on team effort during these times? Really critical thought process and actions for leaders there. And then the grey area here is this other role around the sort of strategic aspect of leadership. This, your contribution, and I know some of you are at the most senior levels in your organisations, providing that vision, that strategic direction, and actually needing to, ensure that your workforce is behind and contributing and has got that line of sight from the high level vision and strategy through to enacting it into delivering results for customers. But these are all important leadership skills, and particularly this notion of how we're solving problems at this time and how we're dealing with change sensitively, something that we believe is a critical skill to be a good change leader, and particularly important at this time. So we draw on that model. We wanted to draw on the what we call the TLQ model to set the frame in relation to that research. Some tips. When people come on our courses, they always ask us for tips. They say, what should we do? What shouldn't we do? And obviously we debate it in a normal situation. But let's go down the don't do's at the moment from what we're saying is, actually, one of the things we're hearing is actually don't use this time to start to micromanage your employees. By that, I mean, actually, just because maybe you don't see them so regularly doesn't mean you have to be checking up them. Sheena mentioned trust. Actually, it's very frustrating when people are feeling that they're micromanaged in terms of how they've got to do things. Give people that autonomy. Dismissing ideas or being cynical. This is a time where we need ideas. We need new ideas. And again, one of the things I was reading recently, a professor of leadership from Hult International Business School said one of the abilities we've got to have is at the moment is a sort of speak up culture. And we certainly need to have people who can come up with ideas, and even though they might seem fairly radical or very different, let's not dismiss them before we've heard them out, and that can be very, very frustrating and demotivating. again, what I'm hearing from my clients is this notion of communication that I spoke about. And again, if you haven't got people sitting around you, if some of them are remote, some of them are working different working patterns or whatever, again, making sure that everybody is informed. And one of the things that really is not working at the moment is where people don't feel informed about what's happening, what the changes are. There's so many rapid changes going on. I mean, in the UK yesterday, we had major announcements about what we can do as a nation during lockdown and during this period. There's changes, there's messages coming out all of the time, which are confusing, which are not always, we've got to absorb. And again, we need to make sure that we're interpreting messages for our workforce, but making sure that we're informing at the right time. We use the phrase just in time with communication, JIT. So it's a leader's role to think about that communication. And one of the things that, again, can have a really negative effect is moving the goalposts. Now, that's not to be confused with the fact that during these times, we've got to be flexible, adaptable, do things differently, recognize there may be roadblocks along the way. But again, being clear about your expectations of your employees and, giving them milestones, understanding what the outputs are is absolutely critical to both performance and motivation. So those are some of the things that we believe are the don'ts. On the other side, and these stand good in normal times, but I think are even more important now, is actually having meaning for your work. What is it that you're doing that is actually making a difference? That's the sort of thing that I'm talking to with clients when I'm talking to them about what is it you're doing that's making a difference for your colleagues, obviously for your clients, maybe for the citizens of your country, the users of your service. What is the meaning of your work and how can that be enhanced maybe in these extraordinary times? Again, trust people, allow them autonomy. Obviously, that doesn't mean there won't be mistakes, and it doesn't mean that actually you may not have to manage poor performance, but actually allow people the opportunity to work in a way that suits them. People are juggling childcare, they're juggling all sorts of concerns. So what works for them? Give them the autonomy to manage as best you can within the constraints of your organization's remit. Mastery, in this sense, what I mean here is actually we are all having to learn new skills. We need to be continuously developed. And I know, for example, in our civil service, many civil servants, for example, have been doing a lot of online learning packages. They've used some of the time to actually enhance some skills that maybe they haven't had chance, like project management or stakeholder engagement. But also, we've all had to learn new things, how to present on this particular system, how to Zoom, how to do things differently. So again, keeping that skills development going, keeping people feeling that they've got mastery in order to do their job well. Critical, and it's part of the TLQ model, is how often do you really and truly appreciate what people are doing in your team, in your workforce? Saying the thank yous, really giving the specific feedback of what's gone well, really important and so motivational and has an impact. Safety is one of the most critical, I think, things during this COVID. How are your staff working? What's been put in place? I know, again, colleagues of mine who are working at home of, what's the safety checks in the way that they're sitting at their desks, how many hours they're sitting at their desk, how many hours are they on Zoom meetings? Again, can be extremely tiring. And actually, people do need to get up and go for a walk. And one of the things I've been saying to one or two of my clients is, how often are you going out, getting some fresh air, going for a walk, breaking up the day? Think about safety in the wider sense as well as physical safety. And that importance of social support, always important for leaders to, make sure and be aware of that. But even more important now, I think, and some nice activities that I've heard leaders doing in having, team Zoom meetings that are not about work. If you can get socially distanced, having a one team were having a picnic during the lunch break, socially distanced. So again, getting out of the office environment, but providing that social support to each other. So really important that people feel that they're in this together rather than being isolated. More research, British Psychological Society. Again, we talk a lot about leaders and how leaders need to be visible, and that applies to the most senior person and the person managing a small team of one or two. How do you retain that visibility? Very, very challenging. I know when you've got huge numbers of staff and you may have them spread around various countries, you may have them spread regionally, but how do you maintain that visibility? And more important now is what technologies maybe can you use, what new methodologies can you use to keep that visibility? And also being available and demonstrating that supportive side. Again, research around that notion of humility and recognizing that you yourself are human and you actually will be juggling life factors and organizational challenges at the moment, but being visible and letting your workforce know where you are and what you're doing. Help to guide employees through the resources. Sheena said you don't have to have all the answers yourself. I was talking to somebody this week who's working on this particular issue herself. She's got a mindset that she is a problem solver and she's got to, as the leader, solve every single problem herself. And actually, one of the things we were discussing this week is actually she can be an enabler of resources. She can point people to different resources. She can encourage through a more coaching style employees to come up with some solutions for themselves. So again, the trouble is you take it all on yourself. Again, are you staying fit and healthy? And are you also thinking about developing employees? Guide them to resources. And there's many resources now on the internet, some wonderful resources around well-being and resilience, which you can actually point people to rather than needing to actually physically be there yourself. And as I said, you don't have to have all the solutions yourself. This is about mutual creativity in coming together, team working, thinking about different options and then coming to solutions. And of course, as leaders, you will decide and you will have to make some very, very tough decisions. But again, just pick the ones, know the ones where you're adding the most value rather than trying to sort everything out yourself. Again, easier said than done for a lot of people around being managing uncertainty for yourself. Interesting enough, often on courses, we talk about how you are around ambiguity, how you manage uncertainty. And some people like certainty, like to know exactly what's happening and will be feeling very stressed in these very, very fast moving times. But the more as leaders we can navigate and understand what's in our control and what isn't in our control, and help our workforce, particularly those that are looking for certainty, help them navigate them through. This is all about helping people lead and manage change. So thinking again about communication, I keep coming back, I make no apologies for keep coming back to it. Communicate, even communicate when you've got nothing to communicate. Regularly, simply and clearly. And different methods. If you do a presentation, follow it up with a note. If you do a note, maybe follow it up with an open discussion. Think about it. We all hear and absorb information in different ways. And actively encourage people to say what's their concerns and fears at the moment. Listen with patience and compassion. again, one person was speaking to me about team meetings on Zoom, and she said that she tried a new tactic, and for the first 15 minutes allowed her team to all talk about how they felt and what was going on for them with their families. And somebody in the team talked very openly then about the health concerns for a parent, and somebody else talked about concerns about their child. And actually, she said, when the meeting finished and they went back onto the business part of the meeting, afterwards she got phone calls and she got emails to say how helpful it had been to share with their colleagues some of the personal concerns they were facing at this time, because everybody's life is different, and it's not a waste of time. It's good use of time to be sharing that. It's about human connection, support, and it's about providing support, and you don't have to do it all. You know, I'm sure some of you have got team members buddying up with each other, mentoring each other, giving each other maybe a call. You know, again, how can you engender this team spirit? We're all in it together. And as I mentioned earlier, trying to get people together, we are being urged in the UK to get back to the office in safe ways, and people are going back using different time zones, sometimes different days of the week. But again, how can you get that human reaction and interaction going? It's really important. But also, the teams need to share achievements and support. So, you know, again, it's about appreciation. Can you genuinely celebrate success? What have people done that has been a real success during these times of COVID? And what have we learned that is really something that we wouldn't have done had we not had this pandemic? So those are just some tips. I'm going to hand over to Sheena to do some reflections, but those are some of the tips, and I hope you find them helpful. And I'll hand over to Sheena now to talk about participants' reflections. Over to you, Sheena. Are you there, Sheena?
I just can't.
Janet, I'm not sure you handed over yet. It still shows as you are a trainer.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I think, sorry, one of the things sorry, can I just apologise? I've skipped a slide, so I'll just do this before I hand over to Sheena. Again,
that's fine.
Yeah, I'll just do this quick slide. Sorry. Again, just a summary to what I've said really is just to say, remember as leaders that we're human. And I know that we want to, as Sheena said, remain calm, optimistic, you know, be that person there so that people can trust and look to us and know that things are moving. But remember, you know, you're human as well, and you need to find opportunities to talk and to recognize that there will be times where maybe you're suffering stress, anxiety, not feeling as resilient as you have before. And also this point about give people time, permission to step back. They know themselves, they know how they're feeling. If they need a break, if they need a rest, that's going to make them more productive in the end. So pay attention. My big passion is resilience and well-being. And the more you can be noticing of that and be mindful of that, the more people will be more productive and have increased well-being. And the last point before I hand back to Sheena is, remember, this won't last forever, but we will be in a new normal. Okay, Sheena, handing over to you.
Thank you, Janet. Okay. I still haven't got control, unfortunately. Can you all hear me, though?
We can all hear you.
That's okay, then. Good. I just want to reinforce some of those messages that Janet has disclosed based on research and based on personal experience. We are at a point in working lives where we need to give more meaning to work. Work is no longer just about doing tasks. Work has to create meaning for the people involved. And there was a comment and a question that was raised earlier on by one of our participants that suggested that one of the biggest challenges right now is people feeling uncertain. And I would agree with that. And the more that you can do to fill that vacuum of uncertainty, then the better. And that's not necessarily just information, because you may not know. And it's okay to say, I don't know, because quite a lot of us are working this out as we go along. But to communicate as much as you can to reduce uncertainty, to fill that vacuum, which might mean about recognizing others' concerns and showing genuine concern for others, as Janet mentioned earlier. Creating autonomy, showing appreciation, being personally resilient is important. And the final point that I would throw into the mix, and this was reinforced for me by a webinar that I joined from someone in the States last week. And this was a guy called Scott Smith, who's a futurist. And one of the things he was really plugging right now to deal with this uncertainty is we have to involve more and more people of more and more diverse backgrounds and capabilities in co-creating this new future. And the outreach, if you don't normally involve junior staff in decision making and discussion, then involve them. And his comment, which I know will upset at least half of the people listening, was that the future is female, and the more we can have women deciding on what the future would be, then possibly a better place it might be. And I know that will be contentious. So time for you to do some reflection. As well as a crisis, this is also an opportunity to learn and to adapt and to be ready for the next crisis that will come along, because there will be another one at some point. So 3 questions for you to reflect on, and please do add any comments and thoughts that occur to you on the chat box so that others can learn from your concerns and solutions as well. 3 questions. How are you creating safe spaces at work, and so that you can learn from this unprecedented situation? How are you adapting personally to the challenge and anticipating what will be next? And how are you creating support for yourself and for others? So one is physical, creating safe spaces and learning opportunities. The next one is about adapting and anticipating. And the third one is about creating the support that you and others might need. Let's give you a couple of minutes to reflect on that and to throw any comments that you like into the chat box. There are some good suggestions coming through. Let's see if we can collect a few more. Okay, so there are steps being taken to create safe space, to use that space more creatively and more practically by having a shift system or restricting the number of people who can be in the office at any time. And there's also some psychological support evident as well. Informal chats, making sure that people have got weekly online meetings, having psychosocial support. Some fantastic things there. Thank you very, very much. Give yourself a chance to capture any one of those that you want to take away and think about how it might apply to you. And thank you for all of you who contributed something. I'm now going to pass back to Janet.
Thanks, Sheena. Thank you. And one of the things I think to think about with, as Sheena said, with those shift systems, different working patterns, working at home, a mixture of working home is again, you know, do we have to go back to what it was before? Because I think now we're talking about a new normal. So again, how do we use those creative working patterns and processes and systems that we're using now? How can we carry those forward and make life maybe more productive and easier around our staff? So again, something to think about for the future. Thanks, Sheena. And just to confirm the earlier poll, as I said, 26% of you felt confident that you were, really dealing with the leadership aspects. 74% said you were, but you need a little bit of extra support. So again, think about where that support might come from. And then about motivating self, 36% were saying, yes, feel really motivated myself. 64% said, well, actually, I could just, do a little bit more in terms of my own personal motivation. So some interesting insights. Thank you very much from both of those polls. This one is a bit busy, this slide, but don't worry about the individual detail. But I talked about the transformational leadership questionnaire. Now, this is a tool, a simplified tool that's come out from it, from our partner organisation, Real World Group. And what this is doing is saying, what are the critical leadership behaviours that we need now during this pandemic? 12 behaviours been identified under those headings that I talked about. Engaging individuals, developing the organisation and leading the way forward. And this is a purely self-assessment tool. So this takes about 15 minutes to complete. And then typically we would do 1 hour's feedback coaching to feed it back, to both look at the results, but also to think about, well, what do you need to do? What do you need to maintain? What do you need to enhance? But also, what might you need to change? So this example, these orange bars, for example, if I was doing the feedback coaching with whoever this might be, we'd be looking at these areas which are clearly the individual has identified these areas as strengths. So networking, influence, a real strength, decisive and risk-taking, a real strength. Obviously, there's areas here where you'd say it's actually mostly being used. Maybe some enhancements could be considered. But then we'd also want to focus during the feedback session on these areas where this particular example, there'd be two areas here where this person has scored very, very low in terms of their self-assessment. So this person would say, actually, I'm not really showing genuine concern for others' well-being. I'm not really focused on how I can support the individuals that I lead. So we'd be focusing very much on, well, what behaviours do you need to grow, develop? And similarly here, showing value for other people's contributions and giving feedback, positive feedback, again, is why aren't you doing it? What could you do? What skills might you need to learn in order to improve giving positive feedback? So again, it's something PAI is working in partnership with Real World Group. Sheena and I are accredited to use this tool, and we would very much encourage you to have a think about that as a possibility. But if not, do have a look at the behaviours and have a think about for yourself what you think. So just for a minute, looking, I know it's difficult now because I'll turn the slide back in a minute, but what would you say you were best at in terms of your behaviours that you enact most? And, are there any any insights from just looking at that list, just spend a minute. I'll put it back to the heading list. But if there's anything you want to add to the chat before I hand over to Sheena, just take a minute. Okay, and any comments to come in on the behaviours I've mentioned? If not, we'll move on. Okay, I think that's helpful. I'm going to move on to Sheena now, and we've actually got a picture of you, Sheena.
You certainly do, because I'm in control.
Right.
A lot of you have put on some fantastic, hang on, let me get the next slide up. I just had a look through the chat room, and you have put up some fantastic ideas. And there are people saying, oh, I'm going to try that, and responding to some of those ideas. So some really great things, from physically sorting out office space to making sure that you communicate with your teams, that you use technology. Some of you are doing that daily, some of you are doing it less frequently, but a lot of you are recognizing that this is about creating a new normal, and we're all in this, so we're going to learn from you as well, and that's terrific. So a few final thoughts before we close down. We've got another 5 minutes. And I want to come back to the whole notion about personal resilience. Like Janet, this is something that I feel passionate and committed to. There is a lot of pressure, and people think that the most pressure is on very senior people. It's actually on leaders at all level. But if you actually think about the CEOs in particular, and heads of organization, heads of division, heads of unit, are expected to appear calm and to appear optimistic as well as realistic, and to try and communicate that. Try and stick to current facts and things that you know will be useful to communicate to your people, but also try and develop that long-term view and thoughts about who you need to involve in sharing that long-term view and helping to shape that long-term view. You will not, and you may not have all of the answers yet. Nobody would expect you to, and it's okay to admit that. It can be exhausting. If we're not traveling into work, and if we're not traveling between countries or between remote areas and the capital, as quite a lot of us do, then we haven't even got that space between home and work. And as this quote, which says you haven't even got that 15 minutes just to take a quick nap before the plane takes off. So think about where you would need to take the pressure off you to keep your resilience and your spirits high. Don't deny the fact that you've got family needs. Don't deny the fact that sharing those sometimes with your team is actually going to be particularly healthy, but also talk to yourself about yourself. You are invincible until you're not. And one of the images about coping in the job as the pressure goes on is, think about, are you on top of the job, or is the job on top of you? And make sure that you've got that the right way round, and that you create the space for you should you need it. So making sure that you can offer empathy, but also be open to empathy when you need it, is really important. A lot of people, and you've shown in the chat room, that you are creating empowerment, autonomy, and other benefits. Think about how you can do more of that, and what your organization might need to do, in future. It's not an end point in this journey. It's not going to end tomorrow. It's not going to end next week. So keep the communication, keep this peer group review that we've started today on the chat room, so that you can actually continue to share ideas and stay in touch and learn from others. We've already mentioned that this situation can be particularly disruptive and affect people's mental health. They may need particular support, and you might need to be more alert to spotting some of the signs that I'm sure you're all aware of. Look at distributed leadership, look at the people who you wouldn't normally think have got leadership positions, give them the chance to influence, listen to them, as Janet said earlier on. Think also about this whole system issue. How can you influence upwards as well as sideways, as well as downwards? And think about what might need to change in your organisation to make sure that the future is better facilitated. So a few homilies there about what lessons we might be able to take forward. So the final request is, thinking about what we've gone through in this webinar, think about what colleagues have suggested to you. Think about those things that you might need to stop doing because they're not useful, either short term or even longer term. What might you start doing that you've not done before that could be productive and could help you and your teams? And think about what you might need to do faster. One of the things about introducing change is right now, we need to do it a lot faster. We need to be more agile. We need to be more nimble in making sure that we can be resilient and respond to the pressures that are on us. So every journey starts with a single step. What's going to be your next step? Janet, any comments?
No, I think absolutely endorsing. I'm just reading some of the chats as well, and really encouraged by the fact that you're saying people that those of you on the chat are saying that you recognize the importance of well-being and how important it is that at this time. And I like, there was a quote saying this is a temporary position to a new way of life, and I very much like that.
I like that one.
Whether it's a new way of life in the way that you're working or way you're leading, or whether it's actually how staff, how you're managing, the workforce in terms of systems and processes. So I think some really nice examples. And also I picked up, so there's already ideas being shared about health and safety manuals and the sort of safety procedures that a number of you are taking in your particular offices. So some great sharing there. So I think there's definitely things that I'm picking up from the chat room that maybe we can all think about starting or accelerating. I've not picked up any stops yet, but certainly start and accelerate. And I guess the other last point from me before I hand back to Sheena would be those of you, the 74% that say you need support, just, don't be afraid to ask for it. Even if you're the most senior leader in the organization, everybody needs support. So I think that right. We tend to think, because we're the senior leader, we can't ask for support, but please just think about that. Thank you, Sheena.
That's terrific. Well, there's only one thing left to say. We're literally seconds over the hour, and that is to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. This is the first webinar that we've done on leadership, and I'm hoping that we will be meeting you again at some future date for the next ones in the series. And I'll hand back now to Slava.
Hello, Sheena. Well, I'm not sure transfer just happened, but I hope everyone can hear my voice.
Yeah.
So let me just thank you both, Sheena and Janet, for your excellent presentation. As they said, our next workshop on leading and managing for results is scheduled to take place at our Central London Training Centre in March next year. I'll post in the chat room a link, and you can explore more on our website. Of course, we hope that the current travel and social distancing restrictions will have eased significantly by then, and that we will have the pleasure of welcoming some of you to PI here in London. Our blend of briefings, practical work, international networking, and benchmarking visits to counterparts in the UK public sector makes for a practical, interactive, and very stimulating learning experience. It will give you a great opportunity to update your knowledge and skills in these important areas. Thank you all again for joining our webinar today, for your active participation in the chat rooms. And we will, my colleague Denise may have already, here's my picture. My colleague Denise may have already told you that we will share the presentation slides at the end. You will receive them, and also we will try to capture key points from the chat room. Thank you so much. We'll keep the chat open perhaps for the next 5-10 minutes before we close the full session. So you will be able to say goodbyes to the colleagues you met today during the webinar. And we hope to see you soon in London. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye and good luck.
Thank you from me too, Janet.